Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Kerfuffle showcase, and I am delighted to have Joe and Pete here today from Kamma Data. Hello, gents. How are you? You both well?
Really well, gentlemen. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Now, first things first. You almost said that like you meant it, Joe. So well done.
Right?
I get a little synopsis sent over to me by Sarah, which feels like a bit like a supplier Tinder. It gives me a bit of info. I know, don't hang up just straight away, guys. But I'll point out it seems like you and I, Joe, have had very different ideas of what to do in the lockdown. So your extracurricular accolades are a triumph of enthusiasm over ability. He has an amateur boxing record of 110 and completed both the Sally-Up Challenge and a no prep trail marathon during lockdown. I've managed to sign up both Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and Just Eat. That's my challenge. And then Peter, to go all topper on Joe. You like extreme sports like cave diving, ultramarathon, skydiving, and you may even find him occasionally mudlarking around the Thames. Well, needless to say, that last one, yeah, I can avoid that. I don't think I really understand, but I know that's what I'm going to do the minute the London pubs are open and I'm back down there. But honestly, guys, you're making me look really bad here with all these extreme sports.
Well, it's what you do, Simon. When the pubs close, you find other ways to entertain yourself, right?
It's looking that way. It's looking that way. So, guys, look, we obviously had you on. We were talking obviously about the top 40. Fantastic. Obviously, you guys were obviously included in the EA Masters top 40 there in terms of innovation ideas. Today's our full one though, where we want to find out much more about what you do here. And one of the things that you come back to us talking about is authorities stand to gain £2.3 billion from a licensing crackdown in 2021. Does this put agents in the crosshairs? Now, I think you've got the attention. You certainly got my attention here. Who wants to just to kick us off?
I'll step forward, Simon. So if you take it live, I can take us through the start of the presentation. I'm kind of Pete warm-up act, if you like. So I'm going to kind of get everything going and leave him to kind of to see us out towards the end.
Good stuff.
Okay. So to give a brief background into Kamma. So Kamma are a race tech business. They've been around for a number of years. And what we really specialize in doing is connecting the dots from disparate information sources. So we use a whole host of different methods to collect information from different places. We take it when it's like dirty, unstructured, hard to read formats. We pull it all into one engine and deliver simple answers on a simple front end. So the first place we've done this, the first place we targeted was property licensing, specifically because it's so confusing, such a kind of a challenging area to get your head around, and so changeable as well. So it changed a lot frequently throughout the course of a week, for example. There's one change every 8 days. It also changes based on where you are in the country. So different local authorities have different rules of what you should do at different times for different kinds of properties. So we've pointed our engine precisely at this area to solve that complexity for agents and actually for a kind of quite a wide range of different organizations and companies within the field. So for this, sorry guys, are there other questions or should we just crack through?
No, I was just agreeing. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what we've got today is rather than just blather on about who we are, what we do, and why you should work with us, we're going to use some of our data, because we're a data-driven business. So we're going to use some of these stats to tell a story and talk to you about the licensing landscape in 2021, hopefully give you some hints and tips on how you should be acting in order to minimize risk and maximize revenue opportunities. Before we talk a little bit more about the platform, why it's useful, again, just to lift the hood and give you a bit more kind of a background on how the tech works, before we kind of move into that final section where people are taking you through the products and giving you a bit of an insight into a Kamma deal for you for the Kerfuffle membership.
Oh, you tease. I like all that. That's great. And just before we kick off, Joe, do you think that genuinely, as we're getting into winter, I'll make it or Christmassy, do you think that agents genuinely do have a kind of snow blindness about compliance and this area? Is that a real issue? Just getting across to them the size of the potential risk?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's why we're starting here as well. We think that licensing is not well understood. It's kind of a low awareness problem, and it's also exacerbated by inconsistent enforcement. There are 408 local authorities, which means there's going to be some that are good and some that are bad. So in some places we actually do quite well, almost off the back of like an accidental ambulance chasing strategy. People get fined and they come to us and say, please help us to stop this happening in the future. In other places, people don't really realize they're under exposure with massive fines and massive risk. So there is a really big challenge around awareness and education, and that's where we're starting from today. So the first thing to bear in mind, the first stat we've got here is that almost a quarter, or just over a fifth, of rental properties do require some form of license. This is from the Kamma data set. It's also validated by the Ministry for Housing Communities from the government. And if you break that down, if you look at the kind of licensing that needs, it's not just HMOs. So there is this. I mean, most people think licensing is linked to multiple occupancy households, which in England at least are defined as 5 people from 3 households sharing at least a kitchen or a bathroom. If you're in that type of household, if you're part of like a large student let, you fall within this easy to understand category of mandatory licensing, which is around half of all those properties that need a license. For some local authorities feel they have issues with antisocial behavioural orders beyond just that large HMO size. They put in additional licensing, that's for smaller HMOs. So it can be 3 people from 2 or more households, which puts far more properties into that definition. And then lastly, some local authorities feel they have an issue with all varieties of housing, and they use selective licensing. So selective licensing isn't just applying to HMOs, it can apply to any property, and it's linked really to the number of people living there, not the number of households. And only 20% of any given local authority's housing stock can be under license without central government approval. So there's bureaucracy working in your favour a little bit there. But it does mean, therefore, that scheme boundaries get drawn in quite strange ways because they're trying to work out what's the best way of spending that 20% allocation. So it does make it more confusing.
Okay.
Now, the big challenge is, over the course of this year, not only are we seeing licensing, at a kind of a fairly widespread level, over a fifth, we're also seeing local authorities under real pressure.
So that's before that. Sorry, so just so I understand that. So literally before that's the second lockdown we're in at the moment, there was a deficit of 3.2 billion. It wasn't as if they were in a good state before the first lockdown, was it?
Absolutely, absolutely. These are reported numbers from the BBC, and this is news that we took. And we don't have financial stats following second lockdown, which is only just about to finish. Yeah. But even before that happened, councils are under facing a real challenge in terms of deficits. This is for 2 reasons. One is they're having to spend more money on frontline services, and the second is they're losing a lot on the income side. So council tax business rates are kind of, from if businesses shut down, they don't get them anymore. In many cases, people can't afford to pay. So they have more things to spend money on and less money itself. So they're asking the government for 4 billion at the moment to try and cover some of those gaps. And if they don't, they're going to cut services. So they're in a challenging situation. They're also, again, going back to this point of them having more money, more things to spend money on. There's like major social concerns. So we're all being locked into housing. There's a real social interest story, or stories in the press in the moment about the standard of homes that people are being locked into. So there's some data around overcrowding correlating very strongly with deaths from coronavirus, which is very sad to see. There's a lot of people talking about how sad it is that young kids are trapped in small flats, for example. So councils are under pressure to focus on housing. They're under pressure budgetary, and they need to respond in some way. And they've basically responded, it looks like to us, like they're responding with yet more legislation. Yeah. So within our data set, we see a certain number of licenses per year, certain number of consultations over the course of last year. I think it was something in the region of 1 new license scheme every 23 days. And we see consultations, at a similar sort of rate, maybe a few more, because not all of them turn into schemes. What we're seeing today, right now on our database, there are 44 consultations ongoing at the moment. So we are seeing 2 years worth of licensing schemes being consulted on right now in our database, which will hit at the start of next year if they become actual schemes.
So if I look at that graph there, you can see that obviously when it first was kicking off in 2014, fairly steady uptake, but then it was plateaued pretty much for the 4 years, didn't it, from 2016, 17, and actually again, just a big uplift there, and more to come from what you're saying.
Yes. So what we saw earlier on that kind of the residential slide, looking at the number of homes, we said just over a fifth of homes need a license. If there's 400 local authorities, this is just over a quarter of local authorities had some form of discretionary scheme. That's the monetary and selective schemes known as discretionary as a group. And so around about 2018, 2019, 2020, we saw some flattening of the curve as A, those authorities who wanted to run a scheme already had one, and then B, coronavirus hit and they had too many other distractions. That's now come full circle, and all those schemes that didn't get pushed out in the last 2 years might get pushed out next year. Now, this is a projection. It's not perfect data. It's not definitely going to happen, but it's likely to happen. So it's something. It's a risk we need to manage and look after.
And I think a really good point to add there, Joe, is that we've seen over the last quarter there's been like a massive increase in fines. I think they've increased by around 25%, like nationally. And I think this is a direct correlation to where we see the market going in 2021. And I think that all the market indicators are all pushing in the same direction. That it's going to be much more aggressively led by councils to raise standards.
Absolutely.
Right. So on that then as well, there's a lot of time where legislation isn't backed up by enforcement, and it's a bit of a a toothless tiger, as they say. But actually, that's not the case here. This isn't legislation that you can just they're not going to get me here. I think many agents feel like GDPR, was again, what was it, the Millennium Bug 2.0, wasn't it? This is stuff that is genuinely, it's impacting, it's affecting agents that aren't on top of their game at the moment.
Absolutely. And that's probably the biggest concern that we have within the PRS is that licensing without enforcement only penalizes good agents and good landlords. So if you are misbehaving, if you are, undercutting the rules and the regulations, you aren't likely to hold your hand up and go and get a license because you know that your property needs certain alterations. So you don't go and do it. And actually, in fact, you fully deserve to be caught up for doing that, for not, delivering minimum standards for your tenants. Those good agents, which make up the vast majority of us, we've already got these properties of the right standard, of the right quality. You go and then pay for a license, which we didn't actually need to have in the first place because our house is already up to scratch. So enforcement is a huge part of the process. If it's not done right, it does penalize the good people rather than the bad. But because we're seeing so much action right now, we can't imagine that this increase in schemes won't come with an increase in enforcement, because we think it's driven by the need to achieve the end outcomes. It's not just them delivering lip service to it. We think, this is going into more detail, we think this is all based off the success that Newham had in raising not just licensing revenues, but also tax revenues. So one big misconception with licensing is that it's used as a revenue driver for councils. In actual fact, you cannot spend licensing revenue on anything other than pumping it back into the system to kind of support enforcement again. They're not allowed to take licensing revenues and spend them on education or child services or anything else. They can only spend it on enforcement. So it's almost like a reinvestment in maintaining standards. This was issued,
isn't it, Joe? Most people do think that's the case.
Yeah, they do think it's just done to kind of to squeeze more money out wherever they can. So in actual fact, they can't use the licensing revenues for that. But in Newham, they thought they'd make 4 million from licensing. They actually made 23 million because so many landlords are actually existing under the radar. So they covered a huge amount. This is back in 2017. But here's the kicker: for every single pound in licensing revenue they're able to generate, they generated £5 in tax. Now that is not just going to the council. That is some council tax, but it's also capital gains tax and income tax as well. They made a lot of money for HMRC. Yeah. So this is where they can spend on whatever they want. This goes straight into kind of the coffers for the authorities, both central and local. So we had a scheme, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Westminster were in the press because they're consulting on a new discretionary scheme. They specifically referenced the success that Newham had in driving revenues or in driving standards to discretionary licensing. That was their kind of North Star as to why they're doing these things, why they're pushing out a scheme. We think many councils understand this, and there is a link between licensing and tax revenues, because you can catch out the rogue landlords. You can also catch out people who are kind of not paying their taxes.
In their head, it's win-win, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. You get two birds with one stone. You raise standards and you raise money. Why wouldn't you want to? And again, going back to that point, this is something which, if done right, does actually benefit. It's only when it's not enforced that it causes problems for the wrong people. So this is the size of this is the headline for the webinar. This is what we're kind of talking about. So if you kind of carry through that same situation with Newham, where you're able to generate £5 in tax revenue from £1 license revenue, they made the 115 million, but nationwide we're talking about 1.9 billion. This is at a time when they're asking the authorities for 4 billion, as I mentioned earlier. They can cover half that amount themselves if they just effectively enforce. So why wouldn't they? It feels like an absolute no-brainer. We have seen local authorities not always follow through before. This time, I'm pretty sure they're going to.
Okay, yeah, I think that's very succinctly highlighted why this is a thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the question you ask ourselves is, are agents at risk, and what can you do about it? So we're going to talk a little bit about the Kamma platform. Some of this may feel like a bit of a pitch. We're going to talk, generally speaking, about some hints and best practices on what you can do with or without the Kamma platform to manage and to thrive in this more complex area.
Yeah.
So the first answer is yes, agents are at risk. I mean, let's not hide from it. I think the first thing to do is to kind of face up to reality. We track the London Rogue Landlord database, which lists every kind of fine and conviction against a rogue landlord. The fines imposed since it started a couple of years ago are over 6 million, and the vast majority, 74%, come from licensing-related issues. So if you look at all the reasons that a rogue landlord can be targeted, convicted, fined, the vast majority are because they don't have a license. Again, that's because a license is doing its job. It's there to make sure that people can be caught out for not hitting certain regulations, not hitting minimum standards. So it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise, but it's worth underlining that licensing is the biggest threat when it comes to getting fined, and the fines aren't always small either. So the per breach fine, the average is 4,444 for an agent, but the largest fine was 167,000 because there's multiple breaches within one property. And the agent, in that case, I'm pretty sure, could have been fined out of existence.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. The monies can be extremely painful. The last point here is that actually agents get fined more than landlords.
That just jumped out at me there. That's almost like, that's staggering, really, isn't it?
These are the average. This isn't us. This isn't our opinion. This is fact. This is our data that we've tracked. That's published by the Mayor of London. Looking, just averaging out. This doesn't mean the fine. The average that they get asked to pay are higher. And this is kind of a key point here, because a lot of agencies don't realise they're actually jointly and severally liable for holding a license if they manage a property on behalf of the landlord. So they are just as likely to get fined for one breach, but their fine's going to be higher. Yeah. I don't really have a kind of a strong hypothesis as to why this is. Maybe they feel agents are easy to get hold of and more likely to pay. I don't know. But again, it underlines the point. This is something agents have to take seriously.
Yeah.
And again, just to make that seem a little bit worse, you got to bear in mind that the biggest fine to date of a landlord was 100,000, of an agent was 167,000. There's also the opportunity cost. We don't talk enough about this. In fact, local authorities don't care about this at all because it's not their concern. But again and again and again, we see agents having to spend huge amounts of time focusing on getting compliance right, therefore not spending time on the front line driving revenues for their business at a time they need it most, because compliance is so painfully complex and confusing. Which form do you fill out to meet which regulations for which local authorities? And if you've got an agency in Crystal Palace, for example, you're on the borders of 4 or 5 different local authorities. That's 4 or 5 sets of rules. And within those local authorities, there could be maps where certain properties and certain streets need licenses and next door they don't. So it's time consuming. It's time you don't want to spend doing this. This is not revenue driving activity in and of itself. And then lastly as well, there's this reputational impact. So rogue landlords, you don't want to deal with them. You don't want your other customers to know you deal with them. It's going to cut down on the kind of both the favorability and the number of tenants coming to you. So again, take it seriously.
I just wanted to come in there, Joe, just in regards to like the reputational impact. I think it really gets overlooked. Like Joe said, we work with a lot of agents in different parts of this process. Either they've received a fine or they're looking to put processes in place not to receive fines. And I work with a lot of our key clients that have received fines. And I'd say that the impact of, for example, having a local paper tell all your landlords that you haven't been active on the licensing in your local area, there's nothing that's going to kind of destroy your kind of key account strategy more than that. So I've seen agencies that have had their landlords with them for like 10 years and a fine comes out and they literally lose 40% of their portfolio overnight, purely based on losing trust with their end users. So I think it's a massive thing that people need to look at, especially if they want to stabilize their business for the future, right? Because it's something that can come out in one day and have a huge impact on your whole landscape of your business.
Well, look at it. You work so hard to obviously build that loyalty and the stickiness, don't you, of them? And they'll famously stick with you even through like acquisitions or selling to other businesses. And so to lose them, for this is just it's so heartbreaking in many respects. And also as well, it's the cumulative effect, isn't it? It's that. I know that the individual agent probably doesn't worry that much about it, but the death by 1,000 paper cuts of estate agencies, lettings agents' reputation again. Every time one of these stories come out, you might be the good ones, but actually the public just sees it as there we go, another letting agent.
100%, Simon, 100%. And I would say to you, we've dealt in it with situations where there's been organisations that are about to sell to a bigger group. And a fine like this can totally break that deal apart. Not only break the value of that deal, but destroy that business that was going to be sold at like zero value after that point. So I'd say,
literally, Pete, at the 11th hour, isn't it? I mean, this could come out at any point there. Yeah.
And I think that's the impact that we really want to drive home. So we work with like people that are very proactive in not wanting to receive fines and stabilizing their businesses. But we do deal with a lot of reactive businesses that are trying to control what's just happened, right? From getting an impact of a fine like that's gone out to national press. What does that mean for your brand? What does that mean for the business you've been building for 10 years? Is your idea to sell this business? Well, that's going to be part of your historical background now that you've actually received those fines for not doing your job properly. So I emphasize that with my accounts because, like I said, I work with real proactive agencies that have never received fines. And I work with reactive agencies that are trying to save their brand from being identified as a brand that don't look after their end user.
Just because I'm just a sucker for straw polls, Pete, what's the percentage? What are the percentages that are proactive and the percentages that are reactive?
I'd say it's definitely changing, Simon. I'd say over the last, half of this year, there's been a bigger push for being very proactive. And I think that's because agents are seeing those fines increasing in their local areas. I mean, we've had our busiest quarters, hence why we're on here today. And we're talking about what we can actually do for these guys, because we're here to support them not receiving a fine. We can help them after they receive a fine and clean up their database. But ideally, we'd like to eliminate that risk, right? And make a brilliant business proposal that's going to protect them from that risk.
Absolutely. It's like prevention better than the cure, isn't it? It's stopping me ordering that McDonald's rather than me having to get out there and do the exercise. That's a rather tortured business analogy.
Yeah, definitely, Simon. Definitely.
Okay.
There's a great point you made there, but I don't mean back foot and front foot. So at this point in the presentation, we're going to stop hammering on the point about the risk and the negativity. We're going to make things positive and focus on the opportunity instead, because there is real opportunity here. You think about we talked about the agent that's worked hard to build this over the last 10 years. What's that person's biggest threats right now? Is it low cost online operators? Is it changing business models? Is it like the low barriers to entry, meaning that anyone with a mobile phone can pretend to be an agent without reputation, without the skills, without the experience? So to some extent, it's worth bearing in mind that complexity can help you. If you are like an expert agent, if you're proud of your traditions, of your abilities, and you want to make the market harder to compete in, then you want more complexity. This is something that you can offer that no one else can help in. So there's real opportunity here for those agents who are on the front foot and are doing this proactively, and they can turn that risk into revenue streams.
Great.
So number one is manage risk in an operationally efficient way. If this is taking your competitors hours and hours and hours out of their day, and you're not doing that, then you're on the front foot and you're out there meeting tenants and agents and getting bookings whilst they're not. Yeah. Number two, on the revenue side, this can be a very large cost, a very large fine to deal with. But it can also be a separate service offering that you take to market, which others aren't doing. So our best clients have set up a license management process. They are offering to their landlords a license application process, which takes away any of the time cost or peace of mind upsets that they have to deal with, and they're doing it themselves. And then lastly, when they do that, they end up holding the license for a 5-year term, which obviously is a lot longer time frame than a 1-year contract. So it can support retention as well. So get on the front foot, and this can work for you. Let's go through those things in a bit more detail.
Hey.
So first of all, how to manage risk. There's kind of a right way and a wrong way to do this. The wrong way is just to spend hours and hours and hours on the phone to the local authority trying to get a proper read on what's going on. So what we've done instead is build a platform. We talked about this earlier. The Kamma platform specializes in taking information from all over the place, taking it from different sites, taking it from different sources, taking it in different states, and kind of scanning it and pulling it together, crunching it, normalizing, correcting, validating, and integrating it into one platform, all that it can give very, very simple and straightforward answers. This is what we do. This is what we specialize in. This is the platform that we've raised a substantial amount of funds to invest in and build. And this is something that we can do very quickly and easily. One of the things we do particularly well is map things down to the address level. So without wishing to dwell too much, we have seen some kind of CRM platforms or some kind of more basic data providers saying they can do the same thing that we can do. And they can never do it in quite the same way. So often these tools will tell you, okay, that local authority is running a licensing scheme. What do you do next? You have to get back on the phone and talk to them anyway. So it's still that time suck. What our tool does is it maps things down to the address level. Now, this is actually much more complex than it really sounds. It's very hard to understand where a scheme ends and finishes. We've got clients that have 2 properties in the same street. They've checked licensing requirements for one property, found they didn't need one, thought they were fine on both, and actually got fined for the second one. So at some point with these, especially with the discretionary schemes, they're going to draw a line in that road, and whether you are on the right or wrong side of that line, you're exposed to it or not. So our tool, to be effective, to support the clients we've got, we have to be right at the local address level. It means the risk is dramatically reduced, and it means the time cost is dramatically reduced as well. So it's accurate to the address, accurate to the minute, and it keeps you operationally efficient.
Excellent.
And we worked on these things, and this title I love to share because I found it so surprising. I think it was from a Good Lord publication. They talked about legislation and compliance being the number 2 concern of letting agents after COVID-19. And this shocked me because I can't imagine anyone else thinks about compliance. It's such a dry, boring subject. Why is it keeping you awake at night? And especially when you bear in mind, if you compare, an agent to a normal, to kind of an average person in the population, what makes them different? I think they're more commercial. There's a commercial mindset. You're chasing the goals, chasing the targets, trying to deliver. So why isn't kind of supplier price increases or competition or from business models or property prices? Why aren't they bigger concerns? And I think it's precisely because we aren't compliance managers by trade, and therefore it's something that we're not naturally, designed to deal with and build with. So what we say is, let us focus on this. Spend your time instead focusing on setting up this license application schemes, and let the money kind of quite quickly roll in. So take the time you would have spent on the phone to councils, spend it setting up new service offerings, and you do and therefore turn risk to revenue. If you've got, say, 200 properties, that can be 20 minutes per property on the phone, or it can mean £400 per application, getting you 80 grand, which isn't going to keep you, it's not going to kind of double the size of your business, but it's a very nice extra chunk of money at times when things are quite tight.
So just on that, Joe, just while we have a look at that, just obviously it's just a bit small on the screen. So let me just talk you through. So which of the following things are you most concerned about in terms of their effect on the lettings industry? Top, unsurprisingly, with 47%, we have the ongoing impact of COVID-19. Second, as you highlighted there, 28% saying legislation and compliance. Property market volumes at 9%, way behind actually at 9%, and property prices just behind that at 7%. So it is instructive, isn't it, that at least this is in the forefront of people's minds, and echoes what you were talking about, Pete, that they are getting much more aware about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And our hope is, we saw earlier that 74% of fines come from licensing. So if we can deal with 74% of that angst and aggro and that distraction from core business activities, it'll make us very happy.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about the 5-year commitment you get from a license as well. Again, we've got some more stats. We like to use data. We're a data business, and rather give our opinion. This is in Landlord Today. It was as a result of the pandemic. Are you more or less likely to use a letting agent in the next 12 months? This was asked of landlords, and 57%, almost 60%, said they were less likely. And again, this is kind of a hard stat to read, if you like. If you think about the drivers behind it, I think too many landlords are too transactional in the way they think about their agents. They think in terms of how much does it cost, how much does it save, how much does it make in terms of the extra amounts you might get on a contract, and how much time do I get back in my day, or how much peace of mind do I get. I think the only way to win in that scenario, where you've got a very transactional minded individual, is to reweight the different sides of that equation. Is to make the transaction equal working with you rather than working against you. So if you can take some of the time cost of having to secure a license, if you can work with and deliver peace of mind, if you can hold it for 5 years, then all of a sudden, if they want to switch agents or go back to being self-serve, they've got to apply for license themselves, they've got to pay more money, and the transactions re-rated back in your favor. So holding license can be a big benefit, especially for retention.
Great.
All right. So that is it from the data and followership side. We've now got Pete to take you the last few sides about the Kamma approach.
Thanks, Joe. So Joe's actually covered a lot of what our system does, but I think just to give you kind of a really simple overview. So we aggregate, we cleanse, and we map every UK property licensing scheme and every council register across the entirety of the UK. We're the only company that can do this, and we've been established for over 5 years doing this for like the world's leading brands in this space.
There's no gaps at all, Pete.
No. So you get 24-hour access through our system. You get unlimited users on our new tariffs. You get an account manager. You get access to specialists. And these are really important fundamentals to be able to drive your kind of compliance and licensing throughout your business. And I'd say, Simon, so we work with a lot of small businesses that want to grow and expand and have new branches. And our tools enable them to do that. Rather than having someone who sits in every single branch that's going to be looking after licensing, you can have one person actually manage this for your group now. And also it's about building expertise through these people. It's not about, researching these council registers. They can be an absolute nightmare. I mean, I speak to people that do this every day, and they'll say to me, like, one application can end up taking 2 hours because there is no definitive answer. We can help you get that definitive answer instantly. So, and I think that's a really huge part of what we do. Is about stabilizing your portfolio, keeping it safe, eliminating risk for your business and for your end users. And I'd say really importantly is that you have to ask yourself, like, why you're in business, And I think we work with a lot of businesses that are looking to sell, right? Looking to expand. Some not, some looking just to have a real quality driven business that that they look after. And we can help you do that. So we've got training programs in place to make sure that your guys become specialists in looking after the licensing and compliance. You get 24-hour access. You're able to upload your entire database and get a quick overview. So like a health check view of what's in license and what isn't. You're also able to use it on like a pre-tenancy checker. So you get a landlord that comes in who's just purchased a new property. Do you want to be informed about what he needs to do? Or is that not important to you? And I'd say if it's important to you, then you use a system like this, right? Because it adds value and it's all about providing a better quality of service all round for the people that are actually renting these properties, for the landlords that actually own the responsibility, and for the agents who are there to be the educator of all. And I think this is what our platform enables them to do.
Excellent.
Absolutely, Pete. And at its core, and I'd say, and give us an instant answer, which you can see in front of you at the moment.
Yeah, and I think really importantly, I think we don't touch on this enough, but people see licensing as kind of something they want to not go next to, so should we say, they want to step away from licensing. And I'd say it's all about stepping towards licensing. I work with some major groups that avoided licensing as an external fee application or anything like that, as an external service. They didn't want to touch it. If we all look at the market today, I don't think there's one letting agent or landlord that's watching this video today that doesn't see that next year is going to be a really different year from the historical years we've had. Okay, you look at lenders, there's going to be more buy-to-let, mortgages coming out next year than there has been in the last 5 years. COVID has massively affected your first-time buyer market in the sense of how easy is it to actually fund these residential mortgages. It's quite difficult now due to what people have gone through in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So buy-to-let is going to be a huge boom. You're going to see a lot more HMOs hitting up and down the country, a lot more licensing schemes, and a lot more fines. But what I'd say to you, Simon, is for the businesses that really take this on, this is a revenue driver. I've got clients this year that have made more out of licensing than they've ever made. Okay. I have a client that within the first 2 months, just going through their historical portfolio, generated around £150,000 in license application fees. This now sits as a new KPI in a world that's shrinking because of COVID. They've actually got something that's booming, right? And you'll see a lot of the major groups that would have stepped away from things like HMOs. You're definitely going to see a huge uptake in all those groups come next year. So, and a big reason is a lot of those guys are now using our system so that you can manage that HMO process. But it's not just HMOs. Like, people think that licensing sits all about HMOs. It doesn't. You can have a selective scheme in an entire area, which is totally based, if a license is needed, on the amount of occupants that live in that property and what type of property that is. There's more fines coming through selective schemes because people are so unaware of it, thinking, I don't have HMO, I don't need a license. Well, unfortunately, you really need to come to terms with what you do need. And selective schemes are kind of all over the country and are growing dramatically.
Okay, so that's really important to know.
Yeah. So I think now if you look at something like our sweeper report, thanks Joe. So the way the sweeper report works, we do an annual sweeper report, and the way that works is we would plug in your entire portfolio and we'd give you a status check on the entire portfolio. What's in license, what isn't in license, what's the market opportunities, what's your market risks. That gives you a whole overview of your market. And so we do an annual one and we do a quarterly one. Some businesses want to see this on a quarterly basis so that they're health checking their internal systems, really valuable. Some people want to see it as an annual report. And I'd say the other product we do here is we do these as acquisition reports. So major groups come to us when they're going to purchase or acquire a new agency. And they would say to us, can you have a look at this database in their portfolio and tell us what the health check looks like? Are they in license, out of license? I referred to this earlier. This is like a really important part of a business. If you think, you're just not going to focus on your licensing, it will come back to haunt you. And I hope it doesn't for everyone listening to this. But I can say to you that I deal with clients on a daily basis that tell me how they thought they had a really rigorous process in place, and now they're sitting there with £100,000 fine. That's going to totally change how the business looks at their licensing going forward. And I think what we do is we provide a really cost-effective service for small and medium and large. So you hear me talk about large clients, and I'd say I work with a lot of small agencies that sell to large groups, and I work with a lot of small and independents that are running a high quality service. So our product doesn't discriminate. You don't need to be a huge corporate to use it. We've got tariffs that are made for small, medium enterprises, and we've got tariffs that are made for large corporates.
Excellent.
Coming on to our offer for Kerfuffle. So we've given you guys a £65 a month special offer for 200 properties. That's like a 40% reduction. We've had a phenomenal year at Kamma. So for us, it's about empowering the people that use us. We want these agents to try the product, and I think by trying the product, you'll see the value it brings. For around £600-700 a year, you can eliminate the risk of having a fine within your business. You can find ways of driving new application revenue. And just to give you an idea, Simon, one application with an administration fee of £400 or £500 has nearly paid for your entire annual use of the Kamma system. So that's exactly how you should use it, right? Like that's exactly how you should use it. Major groups use us, and we don't come into a profit or loss because we totally drive revenue from the first applications that come through the system. It's why people take Kamma. We've also got bigger tariffs for our corporates, and they are on a 40% reduction in price. And again, every single account, SME or corporate, comes with full account management, full access to specialists, 24-hour access, and it's a full rounded service that we're here to help you drive revenue. So even our SMEs, Simon, they get a market impact on how to email out to letting agents to drive application revenue. We take all the complexity out of this process and we allow our agents to drive revenue. It's why we have such a high retention rate, Simon.
I'm not surprised listening to that. just to be fair, I love the idea. Just in terms of as well, you can earn a revenue stream from doing the right thing, improving standards and everything else, and reducing risk. That seems to me. I said it just then. It seems like an obvious no-brainer for anyone who's involved in this world with it. I think that's a really important point, Pete. Pete, as well. That obviously the technology's got to stack up, and in terms of what you guys are doing, pulling together all this data from the different councils and everything else is mind-blowing. Obviously, in terms of there, but actually that hand holding that you offer there is a crucial element of making sure that people are getting the most out of it, isn't it? I mean, I think that's got to be stressed enough. Is if you are outside of your comfort zone, they can come to you and be put back in it.
Yeah, 100%, Simon. And I'd say to you, we're here to hold the people's hands that are doing these applications. We're experts in this field, and we create experts with everyone we work with, and that's very much how the process works.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you very, very much for obviously putting together that deal. That's an exceptional one. So encourage any Kerfuffle members out there, obviously, to reach out to Joe or Peter direct. I think we've actually got a link on here as well where they can book directly into Ben's. Ben's going to be a happy chap if we can start sending him some appointments over this period. So clearly there, we'll put that out on the mail shot and the emails we send out there with people. Clearly, obviously, then we'll just reiterate as well. That's it. All Kerfuffle members following deals, £65 per month for portfolios up to 200 properties, or 40% off standard pricing for that there. So that's absolutely great. Just to reiterate again to everyone, make sure you go and have a look at Kamma, obviously, on their Kerfuffle landing page. There's full information there. There's a nice big pink contact me button as well that you can do, and obviously we'll pass on the details to Joe and Peter there, or obviously reach out to them direct and just let them know you're obviously Kerfuffle members. Guys, I feel a lot wiser about that now. Obviously, every time we talk and catch up, it strikes to me that, well, obviously there's a downside, and that goes without saying in terms of there. But for me, it's only a downside if you're being ignorant of the risk, isn't it? And if you get yourself in place, this actually could be, quite a USP, a differentiating from yourselves from below. So takeaways: don't ignore licensing. Clearly, just it's not the time, is it, for head in the sand? I think that's a critical point, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'd say there's never been a better time to get on the front foot and to get involved in kind of a new revenue stream with licensing. But equally, there's never been a worse time to kind of sit back and do nothing. No. So the scales are rebalancing as we speak.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with Joe. I think you've got to look at licensing and actually ask yourself if you want to be reactive or proactive. And I think that is the total difference. If you're reactive to the market, you're going to be hit with a fine. And if you're proactive to the market, you're going to protect yourself and actually drive new revenue streries. Yeah,
and as you said, Pete, one fine has the ability to really negatively impact the bottom line as well. So, basically get a plan in place, isn't it? Is the first point from that takeaway there. So again, don't ignore the complexity in getting this right. I don't even understand the title, but I know that you recruit loads of very highly talented geospatial engineers. So
our CTO, he was kind of an early innovator. He worked on the Yahoo Maps, which predated Google Maps as well. And now, he'll corner you and talk about maps and address resolutions until your ears bleed. But it's a complex area to get right, and that's why we've invested so much. We work with some of the best investors in prop tech as well, and we invest all that money in building the platform.
Yeah, because this doesn't happen overnight, does it? And it does need a bit of a field of dreams, build it and they will come mentality to get this in all right, to build the scale, to get the complexity. I love that idea. I think we were talking about it off screen though. You were talking about those engineers actually love working for you, as obviously the techie detail people do, because of the challenge it is literally getting this information out in the right format. To pull this information so many different sources, test their skill sets, which of course people like that tend to love, don't they?
Definitely.
And the final point, and obviously this is going down to for your point, Pete, obviously with the conclusion you had, see it as an opportunity. It's like, yes, there's things to the first 2 points, to make sure you keep looking over it and keep making sure you're doing the right thing. But don't forget that this can work for you rather than against you in terms of a cost point of view.
You're 100% right, Simon. So we have marketing packs to assist these guys. They don't need to worry about the messaging. We take that all away from them so that they can drive this really proactively.
Excellent. Good. Well, guys, thank you very much for that, taking the time to explain to us again. Just to remind everybody, of course, we'll be sharing out in the normal places, and this will be up on Kamma's landing page there. So if you need to find out more as well, of course, please share this with your colleagues, and certainly they'll understand a bit more about it. Joe, thanks very much for that. So that really has helped me understand much more the size of the challenge, but also the opportunity there.
That's great, Simon. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Peter. Have a great day.
Take care, guys.